we have considered until now different books, and especially those that were published during the life of Sister White, that she have a direct input to the content of the book, and especially in the final edition and printing. But now we wish to consider some specific books in detail. This first one will be The Great Controversy. And the reason for this is that it's one of the books more criticized from those that try to diminish or to damage the reputation of Sister White that she took from another books, that he copied from another books, that she never mentioned other authors that she have even in her library about specific subjects included in books that she published with her name. So you will hear different critics specifically and particularly about the book The Great Controversy. And this is the reason why it's needed that you know how this book came to existence, and that also other books external to the publishing works in the church were used and consulted. Okay? So that when you receive this accusation, that people say, okay, Great Controversy is a copy that Sister White took information from different books, put together, and then write her name. Okay, this is a critic that is presented, and you need to be aware of it and then be ready as well to answer this kind of critic. And this is the reason why we have this lesson today. Now, all the content of this PowerPoint is taken from two articles that Arthur L. White wrote related with the process of inspiration and composition of the books of Sister White. And appeared the first time in 1978. This is the grandson of Sister White, Arthur L. White. And she was a pastor, and he was also secretary of the Department of Trustees of the Ellen G. White Publications. And because between the 1953 to 1968, the Protestant churches attack in an open front the Seventh-day Adventists, especially related with the spirit of prophecy. In the person of Sister White, he felt the need to gather manuscripts and to prepare a series of articles as an answer to the different accusations presented, especially because she was no more alive, and he felt the need and the responsibility to take an official position toward these accusations. After we will see that even the General Conference proceed legally related with this, and we will consider this, okay? Now, let us see the history of the Great Controversy, the writing and the expansion of the book. So first of all, we need to realize that this book, The Great Controversy, as we know today, have three main sources of information. The first one is the Bible itself. Then we have the visions, the historical panoramical visions given to Sister White from the Lord. And then we have a third level of source of information related with historical books, historical pamphlets, historical articles, historical essays that cover part of the historical sections that are presented in the Great Controversy. And we find this in the library of Sister White. And also she even mentioned the interest and even recommended to read specific books in the context of the historical events presented in the Great Controversy. And we will go through all of them, okay? But the main thing that we need to understand today is that three main sources are the background of the Great Controversy: Bible, the historical panoramical visions, and the various historical essays already available at this time, okay? So these three main sources to understand properly how the writing and the expansion of the Great Controversy came to existence, especially if we consider the different versions of it, okay? Now, let us see different testimonies that help us to understand a little bit more how the process was. The Review and Herald, November 27, 1883. This article corresponds to a meeting during the General Conference in 1883, and it was said, "We believe the light given by God to his servants is by enlightenment of the mind, thus imparting the thoughts and not, except in rare cases, the very words in which the ideas should be expressed." Now, combine this, please, with the Spiritual Gifts, Volume 2, page 293. "I am just as dependent upon the Spirit of the Lord in relating or writing a vision as in having the vision." We already mentioned this in other past presentations, that is not only the revelation itself, but also how the vision become a written information is also part of this process of inspiration and revelation. And in the introductory presentation of the Great Controversy, in the past we have also made a homework that considered all the different points in the foreword of the Great Controversy. And I take some of these that will help us to understand better this situation. "Through the illumination of the Holy Spirit, the sins of the long continued conflict between good and evil have been opened to the writer of these pages. From time to time, I have been permitted to behold the working in different ages of the great controversy between Christ, the Prince of Life, the author of our salvation, and Satan, the Prince of Evil, the author of sin, the first transgressors of God's holy law." So, what we understand with this, that the presentation of the visions that cover one big section of the Great Controversy correspond to the historical, panoramical visions that Sister White received. Let us go on with this. Somebody can read it first, please, for us. It's another paragraph of this introduction. Please, thank you.
"As the Spirit of God has opened to my mind the great truths of his word and the scenes of the past and the future, I have been bidden to make known to others that which has thus been revealed, to trace the history of the controversy in past ages, and especially so to present it as to shed a light on the fast approaching struggle of the future. In pursuance of this purpose, I have endeavored to select and group together events in the history of the Church in such a manner as to trace the unfolding of the great testing truths that at different periods have been given to the world, that have excited the wrath of Satan and the enmity of a world-loving church, and that have been maintained by the witness of those who love not their lives unto death."
Thank you. This emphasis that you find in bold is very important to consider now. Many people say Great Controversy is a historical book, but don't correspond and follow the principles of historical book. And here we find the explanation, because the history is presented in such a way that only the events are selected that have to do with the doctrinal development of the truth. And this is what we find here. I have endeavored to select and group together events in the history of the church in such a manner as to trace the unfolding of the great testing truths that at different periods have been given to the world. So the Great Controversy is a historical book. We cannot deny this, but don't follow the standard principles of a historical book. Why? Because are only selected events. Don't have the presumption to present a historical, chronological, precise presentation of the historical events, because this is not the purpose of the book. The purpose of the book is to mention the historical events as a context in order to understand how the doctrinal points, the different elements of the truth was developed through the centuries. This is the reason why some historical events are mentioned and some are not. For example, if you study European history, you will study the 300 years war, the 70 years war, the 30 years war in Europe. All the crusades, all the history of the changes of borders, the barbarians coming, the barbarians going, the Roman Empire enlarging the borders, going back. You study all these things. When you take the Great Controversy, you don't find all these things. Why? Because it's not the purpose of the book. The book have historical facts, have historical events, but not the major historical events that happen at this time if these events are not related with principles of the truth. And therefore, Great Controversy is a historical book, but a special one. And then many people say, but you cannot consider the books historical, but are only selected some. And this is a subjective perspective. So this is not worthy nothing historically. And this is a wrong approach. Because introduction is clearly expressed and explained that special events were selected, and only those that are related with the development of the truth. If many other historical events happen in Europe or in Near East, even more important than these that are mentioned in the Great Controversy are not mentioned because don't have any importance in the development of the history of the people of God. So all these are omitted. Therefore, it's a completely different approach and perspective of history, only related with doctrine, with the development of the truths. Okay? So this is the second element that you need to understand. The first one is that there are three main sources. Do you remember which are these three main sources of the book Great Controversy? Can you please repeat it for me? Okay. Correct. So this we know. The second element is that only some and specifical historical events are chosen and selected that have to do with the development of the church. Because it's a historical book not from world history, not from Europe history, not from American history, not for universal history. It's a historical book of the Church of God. And this we need to understand. Okay? So let us go to another element that are also in the introduction of the Great Controversy. Can please somebody read it for us?
Great events which have marked the progress of reform in past ages are matters of history. Well known and universally acknowledged by the Protestant world, they are facts which none can gainsay. The history I have presented briefly, in accordance with the scope of the book, and the brevity which must necessarily be observed, the facts having been condensed into as little space as seemed consistent with a proper understanding of their application. In some cases where a historian has also grouped together events as to afford, in brief, a comprehensive view of the subject, or has summarized details in a convenient manner. His words have been quoted, but in some instances, no specific credit has been given. Since the quotations are not given for the purpose of citing that writer as authority, but because his statement affords a ready and forcible presentation of the subject. In narrating the experience and views of those carrying forward the work of reform in our own time, similar use has been made of their published works.
Okay, thank you so much. So, we have seen in the first section of the introduction that she mentioned particularly that only some and selected events are mentioned about the history. Now, here, she mentioned that other publications have been used. For example, the speech of Luther in Worms in front of the emperor and the representative of the Pope in Germany, when he was called, and in order that he presented his view, and after he retracted. Okay? So the word was given to him that he explained why he is against the church, meaning Church, Catholic Church at this time. Okay? Especially because he was a teacher in the university. And he was a priest. So how this can happen? Okay? So he was representative of one church that he was preaching against and was considered high treason because he had doctorate degree in theology and was teaching in the university, Martin Luther, and was teaching things against the institution that he was represented. And then he was called to be accountable for this, what he have done. Okay? And then was the emperor and was the representative of the Pope and were all the princes of Germany, because Germany was not a country at this time, was a federated provinces from one empire with Austria, Hungarian-Austria Empire. And then he needed to give an explanation because they excommunicate already to him. They took from him all these credentials. And now the sentence was to kill him. That was the decision. But the princes of Germany asked the Pope and the emperor from the Austria-Hungarian Empire to hear him before the last and final sentence about him will be pronounced. And the emperor accepted. Okay, that was Karl V. The Pope don't agree with this, but was needed because of the political pressure, so he sent a representative. And then Luther came, and time was given to him before all his sins, all the accusations were presented. Okay? And finally, they called him from the prison. He was coming free, but he was in a room waiting. It was like a prison, it was in a castle. And if you go to Germany, visit this place. It's very interesting. It's there already. So, and then he was called. And the approximately 30% of his speech is in the Great Controversy. Okay? So, this was not revealed to Sister White, the speech, because the speech was written down. Luther himself wrote down. Okay? And after he presented verbally. And after this speech became a pamphlet distributed, because he wrote in Latin and also in German language. Okay? So what was distributed was in German, but the presentation was in Latin language, was the official high level language in the church. So that was ecclesiastical judgment, so he spoke. But one section he made in German anyway, against the decision, yeah? Because he realized the people need to understand completely what he says. And that was correct anyway. So, part of this speech, you can read it in the Great Controversy. Okay? So, he took this and selected the section that was more concentrated in the subject that needed to be presented and was added to the Great Controversy. Okay? So this don't reduce the value of the inspiration in no way. Okay? Because this speech was inspired by God to Luther, because Luther prayed to the Lord and said, Lord, I don't know what to say. You can read in his biography. I recommend it to you to read it. But something I know, I cannot go back for this, what I have said, what I have defended, and what you have revealed to me through your word. So I will not go back. And I will not deny what I have said until now. May the Lord help me. Okay, this is one of the last words that he has pronounced. So, this is only one example. Somebody have read the completely Great Controversy? Here? Okay, then give me other examples, because it's not only this example. Which are other examples? I give to you this from Luther, okay? Yes? Yeah. He gave different speeches, and especially the last words. If you go to Europe and you can visit Prague, because in the middle of the city is a monumental sculpture to John Hus, okay? And this was the place where he gave the last words and he was set in fire. Okay? And nearby is the river that crossed the city of Prague. And the ashes were, put in the river. Okay? So you see right down in the bottom part of the sculpture some of the words that he said the last time before he died, was burned by fire. And different speeches that he have presented, Sister White mentioned when he speak about him in the Protestant reaction in Czechoslovakia, thank you, that now are two countries, okay, Slovakia and Czech Republic. That was Czech Republic, Prague. Is until now the capital city of Czech Republic. She took these parts of the speech of Hus, presented in different occasions, and insert it in this context. Okay? This is one example. Tell me other examples. Yes. For example, in Wesley, yeah, you find also declarations from him, from these reformators, and included in the Great Controversy. And that was from different books. Now, the question will be why she didn't mention, okay? It's taken from this book, page so-and-so. The explanation is here also, and we have here why she didn't mention it. It's here in the paragraph that we have here. Why? Was a public document, okay? And during the description that she made from Luther or Wesley or Wycliffe or Hus, yeah, she remembered this and she wrote down, okay?
Explicó el tiempo de los reformadores para poner la experiencia de lo que sucedió en estos siglos, pero no quiso ella, como dice, escribir un libro de toda la historia.
No, because she only chose the events that have to do with the development of the truth. Okay? So justification by faith, the rejection of justification by works. That was the main point of Luther. Okay? Don't castrate yourself. Don't destroy yourself. You will not be saved because of this. Because if you have committed sin, if you realize that there are things wrong in you, this is not the way. But that was the way how Catholic Church teach the people. So if you don't castrate yourself, if you don't damage yourself, then you need to pay money to have the forgiveness of your sin. So they give you only two options. And if you are poor and you cannot pay for your sins, you have only one option: to damage yourself, to achieve forgiveness. Because that was the image of God giving and presented by the Catholic Church. So only these two ways of salvation: paying or suffering. No other options. Then Luther said, that is wrong. We cannot do this anymore. And he was a victim of this kind of understanding because he almost died because of this. He damaged himself extremely in his health, in his physical condition, because of this way of understanding salvation. Okay? So finally, I will not speak now about the biography of Luther. He realized the completely understanding of the Bible text, they just need to live by faith. Okay? And where is this Bible text the first time? Where? That was not the first time.
First time in the Old Testament.
In the Old Testament is the first time. Where? And this is so important to know this, brothers. Excuse me? Not there. It's in the minor prophets. Isaiah is minor prophet.
Habakkuk.
Yes, correct. Yes. And there is the vision will be postponed, the time will go back, but the just will live by faith. And it's very interesting. The Great Reform, the Protestant Reform, was based on this Bible text. And the Great Advent Movement was based in this Bible text. Because read for us the two first before, please.
También Guillermo Miller habló de esa.
Yes. The disappointment was related also with this.
Habakkuk 2:4. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by faith.
Yeah, but the two verses before this one.
The two verses before.
Yes, please.
And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run and read it.
And this is what Luther have done. What he have done? Tell me. Everybody knows.
He made it plain upon tables.
Yeah.
He wrote it on the-
He wrote down and he went to the door of the church, and why he nailed it? That everyone see it. Okay? And read the other verse before, the beginning of the chapter.
I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will watch to see what he shall say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved.
Yeah. And then follow what we have read until now. And we will see that after the disappointment in the 22nd October 1844, the same section of the Holy Scriptures confirm that the vision will tarry, but the just will live by faith. The two main movements in the history of the church, Reformation and also Adventism, based on the same principle. Okay? And they also practice the use of these big charts, the same way that everyone can see the vision. Therefore, they make this big chart, Fitch and Leach and Miller himself, okay, that we have it until now. Okay? So, let us go on. When we realize that these three main sources are used in the composition of the content of the Great Controversy, the first step to follow is to gather the original manuscripts, right? We have spoken about this. Now, we have a problem with the manuscripts originally from the Great Controversy. The majority of them are lost, unfortunately. The original manuscripts. We have a copy of it, but I am speaking about the original manuscripts. The majority are lost. And the reason why is the different move of transferring of Sister White from United States through Europe and through Australia and back and forth. So all this movement of documentation of manuscripts brought the problem that information went lost. But we have some sections or small parts of some original manuscripts. For example, about Martin Luther, what I mentioned to you, we have these 15 one-pages manuscripts on a sheet of paper related with one of the chapters of the Great Controversy, and we can see this already. But as I repeated, the majority of the original manuscripts went lost. Okay, but still some of the originals are available for seeing and consider. And this manuscript deal with what I already mentioned to you, the time when Luther leaves the diet in Worms and was kidnapping for his sake, because the representatives of the Pope take the decision that if the princes of Germany don't condemn him, when he went out of the diet of Worms, they will kill him. They will take him and they will kill him. But the Lord intervened. His time was not there. He needed to translate the Bible into German, and this work was not done. So one of the princes knew about this intrigue, about this plan of the Pope. So he intervened before they took him. And Luther didn't know what is going on, so until he realized that he was in a castle, and the German prince explained to him, I am so sorry for this situation, but you cannot leave this castle, because otherwise you will be out of my protection and you will be killed without mercy. Will be not an option for you. So the only place that you can be protected and safe is this castle. So he was like a prisoner in the Wartburg Castle that you can also visit if you go to Germany. And then, because of this situation, he was able to write a lot, to translate, and this prince with other people make sure that all these translations and all these writings will be printed and distributed among the people. So the Lord find a way that in no form the message can be blocked or somehow destroyed. And this manuscript related with this specific case when Luther was in the diet in Worms and after in the Wartburg, as a manuscript became an article in the Signs of the Times on October 11, 1883. But if you ask for the manuscript and you compare with the article, you will see that it's not exactly and absolute the same. It's very, very similar, but there are some variations. Not done, but somebody else by Sister White. Was an improvement of the presentation, okay? And in 1884, all this material related with the German Reformation that were dispersed in different manuscripts and different articles, separated in time, okay? So they put this together, all what is related with the German Reformation or the Europe Reformation in general, and then become the 4th volume of the Spirit of Prophecy, that after was also the gift of the Spirit. Okay? A spiritual gift, sorry. A spiritual gift. And was part of the chapter Luther before the deed. Or the deed. I don't know how it's in English. So you see here different elements that you need to consider when you study the book of Great Controversy. The book was not written down from the beginning until the end at once. Again, it's a compiled book done by Sister White, but was a compilation. So was not everything given in the chronological order from the destruction of the city of Jerusalem, the year 70 after Christ, until the 3rd coming of Christ, given to her in a historical, panoramical vision and write down in the same way. No, this don't happen like this. So we are sections of the history giving in different periods of time and not always in the chronological order, okay? And came the moment that the first step was to gather the history of the Protestant Reform, and then become the idea to gather even more and more information, because the articles were distributed, Review and Herald, Signs of the Time, and different magazines. So what we have mentioned, that was to be read one time in the magazine and forget it. So the thought was, it's a pity that this happened, because this was a revealed material. It's extremely important to know. So they decided to put all these articles together. When they put the articles together, they realized that they have a lot of information about one subject, less about something else. So where at this time, in 1883, was the majority of, of the information was related with the Protestant Reform, Therefore, it's the first section that was finished, edited, for what after will become the great controversy. Now, I will, as I repeated, all the content of this PowerPoint are from the articles of the grandson of Sister White, okay? I mentioned at the beginning, therefore I don't mention every time, okay? Now, we will read this section that is also an article of her grandson. Can please somebody read it for us?
I can read it.
Okay.
It is obvious that when Mrs. White started to write about Luther's experience, she consulted books and decided to follow the text of an historian, sometimes using his words to describe the events. But at the same time, she mixed these quoting and paragraphs with applications of the meaning of certain events and spiritual lessons. In examining the historical narration, it seems that she often closely followed the D'Aubin history of the Reformation, and writer that she and her husband had read 1 or 2 decades before. She was very much pleased when she found a condensation of this work in the book Words That Shook the World, that Charles Adams published in New York in 1858, of which she bought a copy. It is a book of 333 pages containing descriptions of the great reformer based on his own expressions, presented in a concise style appropriate for young readers. The author declared that his principal source was D'Aubin.
The origine,
Oh, sorry.
no matter.
D'Aubin.
He was historical writer, okay? And we will see here who was this person. He was a French personality. He died in Switzerland in October the 21st, 1872. And he wrote a series of 5 volumes about la réformation du XVIe siècle. This was in French originally, okay? Thus his 5 volumes are translated into English, it's not a problem. And he focused especially in Luther, but also Zwingli and Farel. Mention also Calvin and others, but these 3 are the main reformators that he mentioned. And the second part of La Réformation in Europe and Europe is Calvin, and occupy the second section almost only Calvin as a reformator. So these volumes were in the library of Sister White, and we know that she had read also together with her husband. And even more than one time, she read sections of it. The Aubigny is a very interesting author because he tried to reproduce as much as possible speeches, presentations, explanations of the reformators exactly in the same way, if it's possible, that were originally given. There we find the completely speech of Luther in words. Different speeches that Luther had done, even from his cathedral in the university when he was teaching, also Calvin and many others. So it's a really source of information that we need. Very, very important. It's not needed to have the books and to read everything, but it's important to know that some of the information mentioned in the Great Controversy is the original source taken from these 5 volumes. Because first was not in English. What Sister White had first was this book, exactly this book, the cover of the book. That was Words That Shook the World, and that was from Charles Adams. And Charles Adams made like a selection of the 5 volumes of the Ovichni, and then he especially selected the speeches. Directly the verbal or written presentations of the reformers that were available in a documentation. And this was the first book that Sister White took related with the Reformators. Okay? But this book was based in the other one with the 5 volumes in French originally. Now we have all the 5 volumes also in English and Spanish and many others. Become a classic historical work in any university. When I was in Heidelberg studying Middle Age history, was a must that we need to consult these publications, especially for this period of time, because he made a very important introduction for the historical background why the Protestant Reformation appeared in this specific time and not before and not after. Okay, and that's what is very, very interesting. So what Sister White had first was this one. That was a compilation done by Charles Adams from this original one. Okay, that was related basically with the speeches of the Reformators. Now, let us continue with the articles of her grandson after 15 minutes.